I'm going to record the meeting. I'm going to welcome you all to the East Lyme Board of Selectmen meeting. It's a regular meeting of October 21st, 2020. Yes, we're still in 2020, counting the days. Additional agenda and consent items, I don't believe there are any. Delegations, is there anyone from the public who would like to speak to the Board of Selectmen this evening? Anyone at all? Anyone at all? Okay, hearing and seeing none. We'll move on to the approval of the minutes, special meeting of September 30th, 2020.
This is Kevin Siri. I'll move to approve the special meeting minutes of September 30, 2020 as submitted.
That's terrific.
Paul Daigle, second.
Paul Daigle has seconded it. Any comments or corrections? All in favor say aye.
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 Are there any opposed? Are there any abstain? Okay. And there's a regular meeting too.
This is Kevin Siri. I'll move to approve the regular meeting minutes of October 7, 2020 as submitted.
Second, Mark Salerno.
Mr. Salerno seconds it. Mr. Siri is the motioner. Any comments, questions, corrections? All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstain? Okay. Ayes have it again. Consent calendar, Mr. Siri.
This is Kevin Siri. I'll move to approve the consent calendar in the amount of $10,309.75 for the meeting of October 21, 2020.
Second.
Mrs. Hardy seconds it. And any comments? All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstain? Terrific. Succinct and efficient. We'll go on to new business. The discussion and possible, well, there's no possible action. I apologize for that. It's just a discussion of the water and sewer budget. Mrs. Hardy pointed out, and there's many reasons why we keep Mrs. Hardy around, but she reminds us of the protocol and the importance of why things are done, and for us not to forget those things. And that's easily done sometimes with all that we do. But we have an obligation as the Board of Selectmen to hear from the Water and Sewer Department Committee on their budget. And Joe Bergaz here, he is the master craftsman behind the budget. I walk in on him at least a couple times a year while he's buried in the spreadsheet, coming up with making this work. And Joe is here to kind of explain. I think he sent out the budget already. I don't know if you're screen sharing too, Joe, or are you gonna screen share?
I was gonna.
Yeah.
So anyway, thank you for having me. Just so everyone's aware, we do have every year have the same documents that you have been handed were handed out at the May 2020 town meeting as they are every year. I think we've probably gotten away from actually presenting the actual information. So that's probably why we're there, why we're here today and going over it. So I would like to share the screen just so I can kind of go over the highlights. I know I've gotten the marching orders, get 5 or so minutes or so on each budget. And then if you have any questions, but this budget is already set the way, as you probably are aware, but just to remind everyone, the budget is we come up with the budget in March. We talk about it at the Water and Sewer Commission meeting in March. It's approved in April. Then it goes into the it goes into town meeting in May. But this time of year, so our October meeting, you're going to start hearing some talks about rates, what the rates are going to be set at. The rates are determined in the fall. The budget's approved in the spring. So even though the two are kind of a little bit attached, they're not necessarily different times of year. So at next Tuesday's meeting of the Water and Sewer Commission meeting, we're going to be discussing rates. With the rates, if we want to do any changes to them, we have to post in 10 days, a minimum of 10 days. And those were posted in the London Day last week sometime. So what I wanted to do is first jump into the sewer budget, just so can everyone see this?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm just gonna hit the highlights. I'm not gonna get into too much because obviously it's a live budget now, but this, what you have in front of you is 3 pages. The first page is the operating budget. The second, and I'll get into what's on this. The second is the revenues, and the third is how I figure out the revenues. So some of the highlights, and I'm sure on the town side, you've always seen my budgets coming in from the public works side. Well, I try to do the same thing on water and sewer. This sewer budget on the bottom, if you can you see my cursor on the screen?
Yes.
Okay, that cursor, it means that this budget is a flat budget. It is not increased from fiscal year 1920. Wasn't overly, it was certainly had needs in our budget, but I was putting together this budget in March and April, right in the middle of a, as the world was flipping on its side as we're in now. So looking at the time and knowing what the impact is going to be on the residents, and in this case, the ratepayers, I did everything we could to try to produce, show a flat budget, a zero increase budget. Just a few highlights of this budget as I go through them. The salary lines show a 2.25% increase. The interesting thing about the sewer and the water budget is there's a lot of different departments in the town budget, but in the sewer, it's all there. So you're talking FICA, Medicare, if someone retires, every bit of benefits, every single thing that happens in the sewer has to reside in this budget because there's no other place. It's an enterprise. We don't get any money from the town, as you're aware, so it has to all be there. So we go down there, there's a salary lines are right here. Then the personal benefits is basically health, pension, workman's comp, all the other disabilities and stuff like that. And we had to, the health insurance was up 5%. I was given the pension contributions were up 16. I had some notes over here, and the workman's comp was up 3%. One of the biggest parts, if this line right here is, if you see the trend, is this is what we pay New London and Waterford. So basically, I'm going to do quick math here, about 35, 40, maybe 45% of our budget is going out the door to New London and Waterford. But if you see in the numbers, and this is where we got the sewer department, if you want to say got in trouble, is the cost, because we share the cost of the treatment plant in New London and it's based on our flows. And I have no idea how much flow is going to New London every year. That's all based on what's going on at the prisons that they don't tell us about and what's going on in town. And in this year with COVID, well, a lot of businesses weren't being used, but a lot more people are at home. So it's really, 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 really difficult to basically guesstimate what the revenues are going to be. But in this year, I was able to drop, or projected to drop, the amount that we had to pay to New London. As it is now, I'm 4 months in, and this line is going to be putting a lot of pressure because it's going to be higher than I want it to be. But that's something that I always had to figure out because, again, I don't have anywhere else to go but this budget. Maintenance of pump station, we have 19 pump stations in town. And on any given day, my utility engineers can say, okay, something $10,000 broke. We got to fix it. So that 60,000 seems like a lot, but we really have to manage that. Maintenance of wet wells at all these pump stations. There's a wet well at the bottom, and that's where all the grease, and I won't get into it because it's after dinner, but all the fun stuff kind of solidifies in the bottom of these things. And, just for instance, right next to Dad's where you get that nice lobster roll, there's our main Niantic pump station. That usually costs $25,000, $30,000 to pump out every year. And we have a window of like 4 days to do it every year. It's always right after Dad's closed. We try to talk to Dad's and Bones Inc. and get all the equipment in there because it doesn't smell nice when we do it, but it's a necessary evil for the system. Means the system was flat. Material, utilities, seeing a little bit spike, and I trend all the utilities for water, sewer in the town. So I basically got a budget based on what's happening, not what some pie in the sky number is. So I had to add some money there. Fuel, oil, and gas, we got some lower costs of fuel by a lot of fuel purchasing, which has helped. Chemicals, we saved some money in chemicals. As you see, back in 1819, it was about 121,000, and it's trending lower. We went out to bid, used the purchasing policy, got some great pricing on chemicals, which helped us out. Salary and wages, the line shows at 8.8%, increase, but there's only 2.25. The explanation for that is that I have to, like I mentioned before, I have 2 employees on the verge of retiring, and I have to carry any kind of payouts to these employees as they go. And obviously, as everyone's well aware, an employee's not obligated to tell you exactly when they're going to retire, but I had to budget for it. So that's why I put an extra 15,000 in for retirement. That's why that number. Legal and accounting as well, you're aware, not only we had up against the landmark stuff over the last 15 years, but we also, this is the end of our tri-town agreement, our 30-year agreement in the London Waterford, which attorneys get involved. So I put some extra money in. So long story short, that's this budget, the operating is flat. The second sheet and the third sheet will be a lot quicker because there's really not a lot of revenue, except 95% of our revenue is either what comes out of your residence, what all our residents' house is this line right here, the 1.606 is what all our residents, and I get that, and I got those numbers yesterday for 6 months. So twice a year I get the number of revenues. So if anyone's done budgeting before, if you get revenue numbers twice a year, it's a little scary of how to peg that, but that's the first line. The other one is the 456 number is the prisons. So we do build prisons monthly, and I think Mark might have mentioned that the prisons since COVID, that they had a population of like 900. I think they've dropped to about 500. So our revenue has been dropping there because the courts are shut down and they've been releasing. So the prisons are by far our biggest customer. So that is having an impact, and I've been tracking the revenue, but the revenue numbers I got yesterday were higher than I projected. So we're still kind of on target for the most part. But the last one in here, operating transfers in, is basically all the so the water department and the sewer department pay each other for different things. And at all the wells, all the treatment plants at all the wells, they have to backwash all the filters, and all that goes into the sewer. So that's part of this operating transfers in. That's a payment. Some of that is a payment from water to sewer. And the other part of that is that our sewer admin, 25% of her salary, because she does sewer assessments at least 25% of the time. We take 25% of her salaries, including benefits, and put that into operating because to offset the cost. The last one is kind of a thing that I came up with, is because no one gave me this, but just to basically track how the revenues. Again, I have no idea what's going to be flushed down the toilet or showers in town. So basically this line, so here's the for 2021. These are all the monthly billings, and I basically take, depending on what I projected, and that's where the operating budget does coincide with rates. So if I'm going to propose a rate increase, then I apply the rate increase, making the assumption that the flows are going to be the same. If I know any information that the flows are going to drop or the flows are going to increase, then I can make this adjustment in this spreadsheet. But this spreadsheet has kind of worked well for me over the last 7 years to try to peg, and we've done a pretty good job of, so everything is pretty much tracking this year. At the bottom here is our rates that I propose, the current rate right now for an East Lyme sewer customer is it's $8.10 for 1,000 gallons. That's based on an 8.880 for the large use customers, just because the bigger the users, the customers, the more it impacts our system. And that's basically shows the rate increases the last 4 years. Well, the last 3 years is a 3% in 17, a 3% rate increase. 18, we were flat. Last year we had a 2.5% rate increase. And even though this shows 2, I gave you the information. This sheet is from the May town meeting. I'm proposing a 3% just because we're seeing a lot of pressure, and our system is 30 years old, and we're having a lot of breakdowns this year that, I mean, they have to be fixed and the system has to go on, but I also have to fund it. So this is, it probably almost better if anyone has any questions on the sewer side before I go on to water.
Yeah, we will do that. We'll solicit questions right now on the sewer budget, because it's two different animals. When you see the spreadsheets, you'll understand. Are there any questions on Joe's presentation in the budget?
Well, I think my questions might be a combo. between
that's
the
okay.
water and the sewer.
Then
So
we
I
can
think
wait.
I'll wait. I think I'll wait till we hear the
Sure.
water side.
Sure.
Okay. I'm going to stop sharing this sheet and get the other sheet up. So give me one
Okay.
second.
You're better at this than I am. A lot of moving parts there, as you can see. And Joe, are there many other public works directors that you know of that are also running a water and sewer department?
None that I'm aware of.
Right. Keep that in mind, folks. Most of those water and sewer departments run individually and separately. Meanwhile, Joe is responsible. As you know, he does a great job with his public works budget. We run a very efficient shop down there, and we see that for every year I've been around, and every year Joe's been around. With his budget, he's very conscientious about that because it's a big driver. It's a big part of the town budget, and he does the same with the water and sewer. Every nickel is accounted for. Joe, it looks like you have your water budget up.
Yeah, so here's the water budget, same concept as far as 3 sheets. The first one is the operating budget. And it has a lot, I know there's a lot of numbers there, but there's a lot of telling numbers. And, the first 2 columns are actual, the first one is the actual 18-19, and then the adopted budget for last year and the proposed budget. This was what was given out in May. I actually updated all this stuff today because this is showing projected 1920, which obviously that's already come in, and we definitely did well. I came in under budget on the water and sewer side in 1920, and on the water side, we have an interesting concept. So there's an extra column in here. If you notice on this right here, the second to last column, it's called from rates analysis, because that's my scorecard. I actually showed you guys the numbers last winter, and the reason I showed them to you is that we were doing 2 big projects. We have a $5.5 million water filtration well 1A and 6 project that's ongoing right now. And that's going well. It started in April, May, and it's going to be finished up early next spring. If you're going down by the Little League fields behind the middle school, we basically put a water line between well 1A, which is up by field 1 and 2, the baseball fields, and piped water, and as there's a water line that connects to well 6, which is down by the youth football field. We're extending that building. The well 1A is the biggest well, one of the biggest producing wells in town, but it's the only one that's not filtered for iron and manganese. So if you I know you guys, none of you guys look at Facebook or social media or anything like that, but if you ever see any of the comments about people wondering about the water quality in East Lyme, this project is actually going to solve it. And kudos to our utility engineer, Brad Cargill, for thinking about this about 4 years ago to now we're at the 11th and a half hour of finishing up this project. Once we get this project done, we'll fully filter well 1A. So all that iron and manganese, which is that discoloration, the water that you see on the social media that everyone's complaining about, will be resolved, and we're working through that. So we're getting close. So on this budget, which obviously the sewer side, we have 3,500 customers. Water side, we have 6,500 customers. So the sewer side, the budget was $2 million. $2 million. The sewer side, the water side, the budget's $3.5 million. So there's a lot more to it. I have more employees on the water side. I have 4 employees in sewer, and I have 7 on the water side. And they'd like to have more, but we try to keep a tight ship. So you go down the lines here. I'm going to kind of keep to like percentages. It seems that's the best way from an executive summary to see what's happening from year to year. The bonds and principal. So we've this well 1A and 6 project is why as I said, I came in front of you guys, and it's a big doing for the town. But because the project is not going to be done till the spring, and we don't have to make our first payment till 2021, what we've been doing is I've been playing with that number to actually level the budget and create a debt reserve. So we've been putting money off the side. So in future years, when we have these bonded projects, I can bring back money into the budget, and so that we can, and that's what I promised to you guys and to the Board of Finance, that my goal and my target was to try to keep the rate increases to no more than 2%. The only way I can do that is by creating this debt reserve that I did in this budget. So you can meter in money in a budgetary process so that you can balance the budget. So that's that line there. The meter replacement project is something you guys have heard of, and we're working through that now. That's something that we'll upgrade so that all the meters will be read. So we're trying to work towards quarterly billing, because every 6 months is killing us on cash flow, because you get to the 5th or 6th and you're dragging. If you can only imagine that you really have very little coming in until every 6 months. State assessment fee is something new that the Department of Public Health is using to fund their operation by charging each utility. That's nice. Bond interest, operating transfers. We are paying back the thing that says payments SAF. Before I got here, the water department borrowed from the sewer assessment fund, and the sewer department borrowed from the sewer assessment fund. And in the last 7 years, we've been trying to pay that back as aggressively as we can. So that's what you see there. I've been, like if you see back here, 2 years ago, we only paid back 25. We paid back 40 last year, and I'm trying to pay back 50. So we're trying to step up the payments to that. Meter deposits. We've been having like I have a meter deposit. All you people, if you have water, have a meter deposit. The whole premise of buy meter deposit was really, I'm not even sure what the premise was. We were holding this money of people for a deposit, and then when they sold their house, we gave it back to them. And I think the intention was if someone ever left town or there was something wrong with the meter, we had money for them, but the $70 never really got very far. So starting last billing cycle, we're starting to make a process of paying the meter deposits back. And the Water and Sewer Commission approved that. So hopefully in the next year or two, we will be done with this meter deposit, so no one could say we're holding your money, because we really shouldn't have it. So that's why that's now a budgetary line to pay those meter deposits back, so that we can give the people, our ratepayers, back their money, because we shouldn't have it. Maintenance of wells is our bread and butter, so that has to be in there. Fuel, power. I mean, we have all these. I have a spreadsheet, track all that. I mean, between the power, electricity costs for water, sewer in the town, I think I'm managing about easily over $1 million in electric bills. So we have to keep an eye on that. There's a lot of lines, maintenance of pump station, maintenance equipment. Chemicals is another one that we put out to bid and was able to save some money there. That's why that dropped to 260. We're not using really a lot less chemicals. We only use them when we have to, but we're getting a much better price for them. Safety equipment training goes without saying. With these kind of workers, you need to make sure you give them the right PPE, and there's a lot of safety requirements. So I increased that. Maintenance of transmission distribution. Maintenance of transmission distributions, I factor in all the water main breaks over the course of a year, and all the supplies, and if we have traffic control of the police, or if we have paving, everything adds up, so that increases. What else we got here? The same thing on the right here, the Public Works Finance Circuit Utility Engineer. The reason that number is higher than the 2.25 is, again, I'm carrying money for retirements, but we also brought in a utility engineer. Our utility engineer, Brad Cargill, is about to retire, and so we brought in an assistant utility engineer well, it's not even the intention. We're going to be moving the assistant into the utility engineer's position. So there's not a lot of organizations that actually have good succession planning, and we've done that. So it's costing a little, but we have plenty of work to do. But we have a plan after our utility engineer retires, that we have some consistency that we can keep moving forward, because that is a critical position in our department. OT, because with the water department, they're every weekend they're on call. They're working, Saturday, Sunday, holidays, all those things. So that adds up when you have 7 employees. That's where all the water main breaks are. The interconnection went up big time because of we are relying on the interconnection more last year and this year because of this well 1A and 6 project, where we and especially the increase of the iron and manganese that you've been hearing about in the from the comments and social media, or just people about our water quality. We have to bring more water from New London to try to minimize, because the water from New London doesn't have any iron and manganese in it. So it helps to supplement it so we can lower the draw on our wells here until we can get the proper filtration. So that's why that number's been, that number should go down after we get through this filtration project. Then we have outside services, all the testing that's required of us by DPH, employee pension benefits. I mean, again, we have all, that's for all the employees. I mean, benefits, I don't know, explain that to you guys. Vehicle acquisition program. It's to keep the vehicles. We've been still trying to keep up. We're trying not to have jalopies out there driving around. They're getting them the equipment they need. And then capital projects. And then I have a line for $50,000 for contingency. That isn't always even enough, but that's, and here down below is the debt reserve of the 400 that I saved from last year's budget. So I basically took 400,000 from last year's budget, put it in a bank so that we can use it when we have debt spikes in the future. We don't just have to go from a debt of 500 to 800 to 600 to 5. That just isn't budgeting. So this debt reserve is going to help balance the budget in the future.
Yeah.
And then there's more revenue lines on the water side. I won't get too much into them, but we do have private hydrant fees, and we have, this is that always discussion about the, at the town budget time of the town fire hydrant fees. That's because that's been going up 10% a year, as requested by the water department, about the Water and Sewer Commission. And again, I kind of use the same concept. I kind of use the same concept of projecting our revenues. I am holding to what we said to the Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance, and to the thing that we proposed a 2% rate increase on the water and a 3% rate increase on sewer. Just to answer one question that might come up is that we do, let me go back here. There's a capital projects line right here, and I had 25, how much did I have last year? I had 15,000 in it last year. I found 15,000 from contingency, put 30,000, but we ran out of time in June to finish it. And I still have that 30,000 this year's budget to do something about the Boston Post Road tank. We're trying to do power wash it and do some touch up painting. And also we had to clean the inside of it. I know it's something, it's been an eyesore and we're trying to address it. Full painting of that tank would probably be easily $100,000 to $200,000. So I'm trying to do something makeshift in the meantime of trying to clean it up a little, because when you drive up the Boston Post Road and see that tank, it's not the prettiest thing around. So I think that might be a question, and just showing where I would cover that in the budget.
Okay.
So if you have any questions.
Let's move to questions. Thank you for all that detail, Joe. And there's so much, we could be here for hours looking at the detail and all, but I know that there was a question by Roseanne. Roseanne, I'll let you start.
Okay. Well, first of all, I asked for the report this evening because the charter is quite vague, and I'd like to see if we could get it firmed up so that this becomes a consistent time when we get the report. So according to the charter, that Water and Sewer will present an annual report and budget before each annual budget meeting of the town. So it's not specific, but because it's an appointed board, in the past, the reports have always come to the Board of Selectmen. And as a matter of fact, years ago, we used to actually vote on the budget. So in some aspects, it's a bit awkward because Water and Sewer has already voted on what their budget's going to be. And now we're getting presented with the budget that they've already approved. So any input that we might have is kind of moot. But so I guess at this point, this is basically for us to be better informed. So I'd like to start with, on the water report, the state assessment tax. This is something that's new. Could you just tell us briefly how that's come about? And
Sure.
Go ahead.
So the DPH, in their infinite wisdom, is to, so that they know that they're properly funded and they don't have to worry about state funds. They are now assessing each water utility based on the number of customers we have, a certain amount. I believe it's $2 a customer, which we have about 6,500 customers, which turns out to, I think it's like $2.15. I have no idea how they came up with the number. So it comes out to be about 14,000. And so that's what, that's in the budget. Let me reshare. I don't know if your screen showed it back up, but state assessment fee right here is 11,000. So whatever that number is times the number of customers, and we pass that fee along to our ratepayers. I think it's the rate says we're charging our East Lyme customers $2 a year, which is basically essentially what the
What the cost is.
what the cost.
Sure, what the fee is.
Okay. All right. So, well, it's not excessive per customer, but when you look at the bottom line, that's quite an expense that the state has unloaded onto us. And if this is something we're concerned about, then I guess we'll have to talk with our state reps. Could you tell us what percentage of the town currently has town water? And if you don't know that, you can get back to us.
Joe, you're muted again.
We have about 6,500 customers, and I believe there's about 8,500 households. So it's probably about 75%. I don't know the exact total because
Yeah.
I don't know how many households in town, but I think it's about that.
It's a good number,
75%.
Okay. Yeah, that's close enough. Just trying to think how many down the road are going to be interested in getting water, especially some of the areas in town that are older that didn't have water in the first place. We haven't gotten any petitions for some time to have water, but I think that's something that we should keep in mind. And how about the percentage for sewers?
It's 3,500 customers.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay.
40%.
Yeah.
40% on
Okay.
sewer. That's why the
All right.
budgets are so different.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. So a residential customer pays the same rate as a commercial business,
For what? For water or sewer?
either.
So the sewer rates are for usage, and 99% of the customers all pay the same rate. Because there's only about 3 customers in town. I think Brybrook, the prisons, and I think there might be one other, maybe the state, that pay a little bit of a higher rate. On the water side, the rates are it's kind of a sliding scale. The more you use, the more you pay.
Mhm.
Do you want to see the rate structure? It's in those documents. Do you want me
Yep,
to
okay,
you
I'll
want
look
me to
for
share my
that.
screen?
Yeah. So now, who are the private payers?
What do you mean by private? I don't understand the question.
You mean the resident?
Well, you had mentioned that there were private payers, and I was looking for where that might be or who they might be. Who would be considered a private payer?
If I said that, I apologize. They're all ratepayers. There's no specific private or public. I mean, whoever is hooked up to the water, whether it's the school, the high school, or whether it's Joe Bregar, or whether it's anyone else here that
Okay.
be hooked up to water, everyone pays the same rate based on the rates that are created every fall.
Joe, I thought you did mention
Okay.
private hydrants. I don't know if that's what.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's not a rate. So
Oh.
we have about 800 hydrants in town. They're on town roads. So say, for instance, Costco might have 7 fire hydrants on the Costco property. Those aren't town fire hydrants. So they have to pay $230 per hydrant to have that ability to be able to hook up to it for fire protection. So thank you, Paul. That's the difference. Is there's private hydrants. I believe there's about 230 private hydrants in town, and those they have to pay for the ability to use that hydrant. All the other hydrants in town are covered in that one line on my other hat on building maintenance. That is $40,000 a year right now that we pay for the town to be able to have the ability to use all those 800 fire hydrants for fire protection.
Okay, thank you. And when will the contract with New London be up for renegotiation?
Again, sewer or water?
For the water. Well, both.
Well, I always say for sewer, it's a 30-year agreement. It's between, and we're a partnership with New London and Waterford, and that agreement ends this January. And Mr.
Mhm.
Nickerson is working with me, and we're working with New London and Waterford to renew that agreement on the sewer side for the treatment.
Okay.
On the water side, the only agreement we have is really agreement set in stone, is that when we borrow money for, when we borrow water from the interconnect, when we take water from New London, we have to say for every gallon we take, we have to send 120% of that up in the winter. So if we want to take 20 million gallons, we have to send up 24 million gallons off season between November and June. And then we take it back. And when we take it back, they charge us our rate. They charge
Okay.
us what we charge our customers. So we set our rate for what we pay the interconnect.
All right. Thank you. And I hear conversation frequently that our customers pay a lower rate than many of the surrounding towns.
Lower
So
rate?
I'm
Did you say a lower
yeah.
rate? Yeah,
Yes.
I have an analysis, and it's basically, again, not all the other towns have a sliding scale where the more you use, the more you pay, and we do that for conservation. So the less water you use in East Lyme, like say if you're a customer that only uses between 20, 30, 40,000 gallons for 6 months, you're going to definitely pay less than MPU. You're going to be definitely paying less than Groton Utilities. But once you start using more, because they don't do that slide, the reason that being that is most other utilities charge on a monthly basis, and they charge a minimum charge monthly. And we don't do that on the sewer side. We just charge for usage. So we're charging every 6 months. So it's as if you were getting your electric bill every 6 months. When you get your water bill in East Lyme, you kind of fall down because it seems like a lot. But if you divide that by 6, that's what all the other towns are getting. And so they kind of slide in a higher monthly rate charge, but we bill every 6 months, which we have to change to quarterly because from a cash flow standpoint, it's killing us.
Okay. All right. So thank you. A couple of other things that I have on my list you addressed during your report, and that is the tank on Boston Post Road. I drive by that most days, twice a day, and it's hideous. So I'm anxious to get for the department to get going on that. And I think the appearance of it also leads to questions that I get from the public about the condition of the water inside the tank. So I'm glad that that's on the list to be taken care of. And my last thing is, at one point, I believe in earlier reports, it was noted that we have a high sodium content in a couple of the wells. And I'm wondering if we can ameliorate some of that by cutting back on the salt that we put on the roads in the winter.
That's something we can look into. But for instance, as I said before, 2 of our primary wells are right next to the school property. The town doesn't, when I say the town, highway department, I don't salt those roads. So we'd have to talk to the Board of Ed about reducing their usage of salt, because those are primary wells there. Whenever there is a well in the nearby a town road, it's something we can look into.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much for your thoroughness. I appreciate the information, and so I think we're much better informed. And thanks a lot.
Thank you, Roseanne. Joe's more humble than he needs to be sometimes. You know, we have cut back on the salt, and for this reason, and it's just not just the adjacent school property. It's salt throughout the town, but there's a balance too, right? So if you don't salt enough and cars are slipping, and is there a liability to the town that we haven't treated our roads properly? And of course, we do have the state highway that runs right through the town, and of course, right over the aquifer, which that water going underneath the highway is ending up in our wells right there. So there is an issue, and we're hoping when that highway gets rebuilt that we'll have some storm or spill mitigation, but also maybe a salt mitigation situation there, or a salt reduction area when that's built. And we're hoping to see a little bit of progress on that in the next coming couple of years. So thank you, Joe. Very informative. Any other questions? As you know, I'm chairman of the Water and Sewer Commission. Kevin often sits in for me or with me on the Water and Sewer. So we're hearing this again. Okay, if there's no other questions, thank you, Joe, for coming out tonight. Much appreciated. I know you had a long day. And another person with a long day is, well, the chief, and now the lieutenant, Michael Masick. Folks, thanks for coming. There was also a request by the Board of Selectmen to just hear a brief synopsis about the police accountability. More shall be revealed as more is delivered and more is worked out in committee work if the committees ever end up back in Hartford. But there was a police accountability legislation that passed. And there is some unfunded mandates, significant unfunded mandates that have been pushed to the towns, and then responsibilities as well. So if Chief and Lieutenant could brief us briefly on that.
Good evening, and thanks for asking us to attend the meeting to review this. So just to kind of recap a little bit of what the first selectman just discussed. Back in July, the legislature, passed the police accountability bill. It's 44 parts to this, and many of those parts are voluminous. Many are interwoven with other issues. So you'll notice on the sheet that I put together, kind of a cheat sheet for you to discuss this issue. Some of the issues are touched upon in multiple parts of this bill. Some parts of the bill are procedural. Some have no economic impact whatsoever. Some have a very direct economic impact, while others have economic impacts that many believe could be forthcoming. And I think that's part and parcel to kind of where this has to go. So if we can just kind of walk through this a little bit, and certainly open to any questions you may have. I tried to identify the areas that I saw, and in many of the conversations I've had with the Connecticut Chiefs of Police, the other organizations that are discussing this bill at length, where they saw the possibility of cost impacts to communities. Section 1, right off the bat with certification, requires that drug testing be accomplished for every police officer during every recertification cycle. Every 3 years, police officers in the state of Connecticut go through a recertification cycle where they have a certain number of hours they have to achieve during that time. So now they're going to put the additional mandate of doing a drug screening. So that estimated cost based on what we pay right now for entry-level officers would be about $1,482 over a 3-year period. As you'll see with this in the psychological, it's very difficult sometimes to say how much in 1 year, because not every officer is spread out with their date of recertification equally. And that is when they became an officer, post issued their cards. Everybody's on a different cycle. So in theory, with 26 officers over a 3-year period, 1 year, we could have 15 officers that have to go through. The next year, we can only have 5. So you can see it's very difficult to adequately and accurately do this right off the bat. Certainly, we'll have to drill down during budget season and anticipate who over the next coming year is going to have to be recertified. Part 2, section 3, 15, and 16. The psychological and behavioral assessment. It calls for it every 5 years. The question that does linger with this, and it's effective January 1st of 2021. However, it also calls for a task force to be convened at the state level to look at what they're going to be doing for qualifications for those individuals that are going to be doing the assessment, and really what are the parameters of that assessment. So certainly right off the bat, what we pay for the entry level psychological that's required of every officer we're hiring. If we extrapolate that to every officer in our department, it comes out to $16,900 for those assessments. Again, the question is certainly going to be in this scenario, it's over a 5-year period. What hasn't been shown to us or discussed is how they're breaking that 5-year period down. So is everybody going to have to do it at year 5, at year 1, spread out through that 5-year period? So that, for budgetary purposes, is still to be determined. The other part, and I put the stars under that last part because there's certainly some concerns, and every police union in the state of Connecticut has approached their municipalities to ask to collectively bargain this part, because it's certainly foreseen that there's going to be a lot of impact from this. And the impact being, let's just say if an officer has been a police officer for 20 years and they have had many traumatic events during that career. We don't know the parameters, or nobody has spelled out what the parameters are going to be to say these officers have passed this psychological. If they have PTSD and that PTSD is attributed to events that happened during their career, well, now that possibly can come over to a workers' comp issue that certainly can have a financial impact on the town, which at this point is impossible to figure what the cost or impact may be to municipalities. So that's going to be a very large unknown on this portion, as well as going back to the first part of saying every 5 years, how is that going to take place, and who's going to be able to do these assessments? If it's the same psychological group that we utilize for the entry level, well, we know that's a fixed cost of $650. If we're able to go shop for other vendors for that, we may be getting a different cost, up or low. We don't know that at this point. Section 7, implicit bias training. It's effective immediately. However, the bill does not specify the number of hours or who may teach the course. So an estimated manpower cost for us to have additional hours of training is about 5,640 hours. That's because if we have to bring officers in, replace officers on the road, bring them in on their off time, there's certainly costs involved with that. But there's also a possible instructor cost. So if we have to contract with a vendor to come in to teach these areas, again, not knowing how many hours, there may be that cost of training that we have to incur to get that trainer to come in there. It has not been determined yet if this will take place during the Law Enforcement Council research that each officer goes to for a 40-hour period every 3 years, because we have to remember, and this is certainly something that POST, which is the organization for the state that manages the certifications, they have to determine, because there's so many legislative mandates in mandated areas, we are actually getting to really capacity for that 40-hour week of what we have for trainings and what the actual legislature has mandated. So that is an unknown cost at this time. However, again, the 5640 is a good cost, at least for that. Now, again, they haven't specified how often this takes place and how long that training has to be. Some trainings, for example, maybe one for human trafficking. That was a mandate that they put in there. That was a 1-hour training. So again, you have the cost impact from that. Now you add this to it. Could you bundle them together? Possibly. You know, those are things for us to explore. But again, knowing that we have a tremendous amount of mandated trainings. Moving on to section 18, the feasibility and impact of social workers. Now, based on the wording of this, a big question exists of who funds that. Certainly looking at that feasibility of having social workers respond with officers to certain calls for service. And I think there's many valid areas inside of this. We currently work very closely with Mobile Outreach, Eastern Connecticut Mental Health. But again, if they're going to mandate that social workers be a larger part of the response, the question has to remain, is the state going to fund that? Private organizations going to fund that, or will the municipalities have to fund that themselves? That has not been resolved. So just, I'm bringing that to your attention because we don't know at this point who's going to have to fund that. Section 19, 20, and 45, the issue of body worn cameras. Certainly this is I believe an extremely positive move forward. I think body cameras are very good for law enforcement. I think it helps us and our communities, something that I definitely advocate for. And then obviously there's a cost involved. We're currently working with multiple vendors right now to narrow down the possible costs. It's very important to remember these are not apples to apples to apples, so to speak. So if we're looking at 3 vendors, they all offer vastly different types of products that do different services. And what we're trying to do is weigh them versus what we believe we need for our community to best serve our size department, interact with our in-car systems, our record systems, the type of storage we're going to utilize, as well as the cost, and understanding what is the most efficient and cost-effective way to do this. In making this legislation, the legislature has reduced the reimbursement from 50%, which it had been, to 30% for the body worn in the initial purchase. No matter what vendor we end up going with, we're certainly going to be working hard to maximize what we can get for reimbursement, because a lot of that comes into what pieces and parts are needed for these systems. Understand too, that 30% reimbursement is for the initial cost and deployment. It does not include the continuing cost for storage. And I just need to continue to point that out. The storage is definitely a concern. It's a concern for every agency. If anybody has paid attention to the conversations over the past 5 years, a big reason that many departments originally did not go to body cameras when the state first rolled out the ability to get the reimbursement was because of storage, because it is a huge amount. If you envision, if every encounter that a police officer on the road has with their citizens has to be recorded, and there's a certain amount of time that has to be kept, 90 days for every conversation or every incident that does not involve an investigation or does not involve a criminal act, that's voluminous. Just think about your cell phones. If you do any videos and you do videos of family or events, that adds up. So if you have 4 officers working a shift and you have 3 shifts a day, that becomes a lot of video. So that storage is certainly a concern and an issue, and we're very paying close attention. At the same time, I'm working very closely with Groton Town, New London, and Stonington. I'm a big advocate of not reinventing the wheel, of talking to them, because they are all currently undergoing this same kind of examination for vendors. And I believe that, we all have very similar needs, even though the department sizes may be different. We are all on the same page with what we're looking for from these vendors, and really trying to maximize the ability to say, hey, I can go see, for example, next week we're going to Groton Town. We're going to look at those body cameras, look at the system they have. They currently have body cameras, but not in-car cameras. So they're looking to make that connection up there, but really meet with them and see what they like, don't like, kind of go through some stuff. We've also requested from some of these vendors loaner body cameras to really deploy out in the field to say, okay, how are we going to do this and how's it going to work? The problem with the legislation is simply that you have a very small number of vendors, and you have every police department in the state of Connecticut and many more around the country that are all at the same time shopping for this. So it becomes very difficult to get pricing, very difficult to get those loaner cameras. So while I wish it could be quicker, we're trying to work diligently for the town's benefit to give us the best that will last us and serve our community very well. Section 41, civil cause for action. Just one piece in there. It's inherent in the bill, which language causes the possible liability costs increases for the town. Again, impossible to establish a true cost, but certainly understanding that the issue of qualified immunity, understanding that if that is not an allowable defense, if it doesn't mean that there's going to be a finding of fault, but it extends that process out sometimes. And that process, as you all know, the legal fees will add up, and that is borne by the town. So certainly has a possible impact. Again, absolutely no way to anticipate what that may be, as is mostly the case with any legal fees. You don't know until you're in the middle of having to use those. And section 44, the accreditation piece. This is kind of, I think, the hidden piece that was inside of this bill for cost effect. It's number 44, which I make the assumption based on my conversations with our representatives that it was thrown in there last. But CLIA accreditation. CLIA is a national organization. So in the state of Connecticut, we have the Police Academy has a 3-tiered accreditation, as CLIA, who is a national organization, also has that accreditation. They're saying in this bill requiring that all departments achieve CLIA accreditation by the year 2025. Inside of that process, it's a 4 to 5 year process. What this means is all of the department's policies, all of their procedures, as well as many facility issues have to meet the standards that CLIA has set for police agencies. That includes your dispatch center, that includes any holding areas, and includes your animal control. Every single piece that touches a police department has to meet the standards that CLIA has set. Now, they're very high standards. They are really the gold standard of what law enforcement has tried to achieve. There is a very limited number of Connecticut agencies that are accredited. So it brings a couple points. CLIA is going to be overwhelmed, I think, with the ability to get our agencies accredited. However, because of the legislation, it only gives us to 2025 to complete a 4 to 5 year process. So it's something we're going to have to undergo fairly soon. But basically, it requires an almost full-time assignment to accreditation manager to get these policies up and running. So the initial fee for the accreditation for CALIA is $6,500. As I said, it requires really a accreditation manager. That's how all departments handle this. We also have some opportunities, I think, and we've discussed this with other departments, some law firms that specialize in police policy that are offering to work with departments for, a fee around $25,000 to help them develop policies, to help them review those policies. I think, at some point when we have a conversation as we get into this process, that may be money very well spent, simply because we're going to have our own town attorneys review all of these policies. And there are literally hundreds of policies that have to be adapted, changed, updated, and monitored. So I think, that may be a road that is the best interest of the town to go down, as well as having somebody in that assignment to work as the accreditation manager, which we've discussed at the police commission level at length. So those are the areas inside the accountability bill, which I see and others see as the cost issues inside of that, but certainly would be open to any questions you may have.
Chief, especially this last amount, the 25,000, and the conversation the town has to have. Are these conversations will come up at budget time for next year? And that's part A. And part B is what kind of pressures are we going to be under this fiscal budget year, where we've really assigned no money to any of this, and we got to go find it through contingency or cost cutting somewhere else? Are there pressures immediately on the police accountability, and then going forward?
Sure. Well, I think first and foremost is the body cameras. The body cameras are going to be the first large impact that we're going to have to get, because we also have to remember the way that the state does their reimbursement. So yes, the legislation says 30% reimbursement. It also capped the amount of money that was being put into that. So really, we are in the midst of a scrambling game to really beat other communities to that money, because while 30% reimbursement is not a fixed number, but an achievable number, if they only put $4 million in the bill, which is the number I believe is in there, it's also reimbursement. So we have to outlay the money, we have to implement the system, and then do the reimbursement through OPM. And it's a risky proposition because we have to do it by legislation. However, that reimbursement, though it's required, is capped at the amount of money for the entire state. So if you understand, you can foresee that's probably first and foremost in my mind of something that needs to be done quicker. And that's why we're really working quickly with the camera companies to get pricing, to get us to the point of we're able to bring something forward to the town and make a purchase. So I think that first and foremost is your largest expense. I think the drug testing is certainly, it's a small amount. The psychological is certainly, we'd have to come back to the town for that amount, because we don't have 16,000 extra inside of our training budget.
That has to be done by June 30th. Is that what or some of that?
Well, we don't know that. That's the thing, is they need to be able to tell us. It says it goes into effect January 1st, 2021, but they have not determined the parameters for
Right, I remember that.
how we're going to divide that 5 years. Does it start now, or do we have 5 years to get everybody done, and I can spread that out over those 5 years? So we're still waiting on that. Implicit bias, same thing. If they say within a year you have to have that training, then certainly that that's money we have to add into our training budget, because it's money that's not accounted for. We're thin as it is because the state has so many mandates that we're trying to get people in. There's not a lot of fluff in there to accommodate those things. And the accreditation, my viewpoint of that is, I believe that the issue of the 25,000, for example, would be a budgetary issue for next year. To have that conversation with a law firm to say, we're looking to do this in this time frame, and to retain their services to perform that task with us.
Thanks, Chief. Other questions?
Yeah, I've got a question.
Cunningham, sure.
Do we know it yet? And despite our best efforts to comply with the act, what happens if a police department is unable to comply in all aspects, and particularly with the CALA accreditation?
So
go ahead,
Dan. The language in the bill addresses that, and it says those who have not achieved that accreditation posts will be assigned to work with them to ensure that it is done. Now, again, I think we can all envision there's going to be a glut of departments that are at that kind of, I think, pinch point and maybe not done at that time. So then the state is going to have to step in and say, how are we going to ensure and make sure they do that? There's not a penalty attached to it, but certainly I think, envisioning it has to be done, it's going to have to be done. But again, they haven't assigned a penalty if you haven't, other than if you haven't done it by 2025, post is then assigned to ensure that you're getting it done.
There may not be a statutory penalty, but I can assure you that, if there is a civil cause of action brought and a particular department has complied with the CALA, that's going to be a lot of nice meat for that plaintiff's attorney. So I think we really have to, and I know that we will work hard to achieve this, but I think there are probably other exposures outside of the statute, particularly with that civil cause of action, that we really need to be aware of and try to do everything we can to achieve that accreditation.
Great.
That's it. That's all.
Okay. All right, I'll go next.
Sure.
I was jotting a few notes, Chief, as you were talking. I'd like to start with a certification. Every recertification cycle, I thought I had heard 5 years, but then I wrote down 3 years. So which is right?
Well, so they're both right. The certification cycle is every 3 years, and that's for section 1 for the drug testing. The 5-year is for the psychological, and that's why we're questioning, and every department is questioning the language that's written, because the parameters are not set where in that 5-year period officers have to go for a psychological assessment. Because right now they're recertified every 3 years, which is consistent with the drug testing. So the psychological in the 5-year process would be outside of that 3-year window at some point. Is it the beginning, the end, 2 years after? It could be at any point in 5 years. But again, they have not set those parameters, so I cannot give you an answer definitively for that.
Okay. Section 7, the bias training. The school system, I know, has already contracted with a couple of people to come in and do some of that, and that might be a possible source for you.
I'll give you, not to cut you off, but I'll give you an example. We don't know that simply because the state has not set what they need for that training. They've just named it as bias training, but haven't said what that would accomplish. And then I'll give you an example, the human trafficking training. There's legislation that came into place last year, it was set 2 years ago, that required every police officer to undergo human trafficking training. However, they were very, very distinct that DCF was the only organization that could provide the training at first and then train the trainers that could do it after. So we couldn't contract with outside agencies to do that. So, Roseanne, I completely, if we can do that, that would be outstanding, because there's other trainings that we have done. We did one in conjunction with the Nottingham Fire Department, not too long ago on another mandated training area that we were able to go out and contract with somebody and piggyback with them. So if the possibility exists, we absolutely will examine that and find ways to do that, because that ultimately reduces the cost and allows us to get it done more efficiently.
Well, I think there are other small towns like ours along the coastline that we might partner with and offer regional training so that we aren't all bearing the cost individually. I know some of the police departments have been able to, when they've had their new buildings constructed, be able to have large meeting rooms. And, obviously we couldn't have all our officers go at the same time, but it would seem to me that we have certain commonalities with many of the other communities along the shoreline that we could regionalize for some of the training anyway. Of course, the big thing is the body cams. Now, every officer will have to have their own camera. Is that correct?
That's correct. But so based on the way the legislation is written and has been written, officers all have to be able to record activities that they conduct. Our situation in the town of East Lyme, let's take Celebrate East Lyme, for example. That is an all hands on deck event. I can't have, I can't buy body cameras and buy, let's say, 15 of them and share them, because more than 15 people don't work the road. because anytime I have a deployed officer, I have to be able to provide them with a body camera. So I have to think of
Right.
that situation and say, we need to issue them personally to each officer. We have to purchase several spares should there be mechanical problems and have to be sent back for those. So we're really realistically looking at least 28 cameras that have to be purchased.
Okay. Has anything come out with the idea of having the state put in orders for certain the most popular types of cameras, so that we could get a state bid list as they do with other products and things, where they could, because they would be buying a larger volume, that we might be able to get lower prices?
Yeah, I know the conversation has been floated out there, and I have heard nothing on the state level of their interest in doing it. For example, the state police and the state agencies use a specific vendor. That is not the vendor that the vast majority of other municipalities utilize. And there's, I would say, mechanical reasons for that, because the state bid process or state process for getting that, it's a older system. But I certainly, I would say, I hope that conversation takes place. And in conversations I've been in, I know that same question that you asked has been broached about trying to get there. The other problem with this whole thing is all these body camera vendors, to be quite honest, they know that Connecticut right now is a right market. So,
Right.
I'm trying to even leverage our regional partners the same way that you're talking about with some of these vendors. And that's why I said we're working closely with New London, Groton Town, Stonington, other departments, because, trying to say, hey, we're all working together here to try to drive the price down. But we certainly are going to keep that viewpoint out there for the state. Unfortunately, I also don't want to, wait too long for that, because that reimbursement may dry up.
Right. I agree. The legislators have gotten us into this mess. They ought to be able to help us get out of it. So now, because I don't know exactly what we're talking about for specifications for the cameras, does there have to be any kind of synchronization with the cameras that are in the cars?
So by statute, by this act, all police vehicles that are not administrative have to have in-car cameras, as well as every officer have body-worn cameras. The statute itself does not call for the synchronization. I will tell you, however, from an administrative standpoint, you absolutely have to have a synchronization of those systems, because you need that data all to go back to the same spot and same place and be together. And the systems right now are becoming so smart, which is to our advantage, where it works even with your record system to say it knows that all these cameras were at the same GPS location. So it takes all of that data and puts it into a file for this case with the case number, because it's smart enough to understand that that's a case number. You can't do that if you have separate systems in your car and on your body. So there's so much now, just with, I can't overstate, with the amount of data that is uploaded and how it's stored. Having two systems would just be unmanageable to do.
So are we going to then try to get cameras, body cameras, that sync with the existing car radios? I mean, the car cameras?
So we have examined from that vendor. I will tell you that that system is the one that's lacking. And I'll be honest with you, we've been in the current system that we've had here for well over 10 years. It was a system that was purchased because that's what the state police utilized. And I will say it, again, every department in Connecticut has not gone into that system, and there's a functional reason for that. That's also been the most difficult vendor for us to work with right now, to even get pricing, to get them to come out to do demos. The product just is not on the same par as the other ones. And that's why I think we really need to have a good look at how we're doing this, what we're going to be able to provide for our officers and for our community. And yes, it may be a little more costly, but I think at the end of the day, you're going to like that product better. It's going to be much easier and seamless. One thing I worry about the most with body camera or in-car camera systems is failure. Is either upload failure, recording failure, officer failure. So I'm trying to find systems that reduce that ability as much as possible. And I'll give you
So
one
if we
other-
were to get, oh, go ahead.
No, please, Roseanne, ask a question.
Well, if we were going to then consider getting cameras that are new car cameras, would those that would be compatible with the body cameras, would the new car cameras be eligible for the 30% reimbursement as well?
The actual camera itself would not. Components of the system for storage and everything else would be. So there's ways to bundle that it becomes eligible. And that's what we're trying to work with through, with the vendors. And remembering too, every car that we purchase a new camera with when we make that purchase. So, I'm trying to find kind of creative ways for us to make those purchases, now rather than 2 years from now or 3 years from now when that car is purchased. So I'm trying to make it so it's a cost we're going to spend anyway. And we do have that vehicle account that we buy cars out of. So this is all kind of moving parts to try to, give us the best system for you and us, but also have the least economic impact on the town.
Okay. Thank you very much. Oh, I know. I have one other thing. For the, what section is it that talks about the, I don't know if it's with the accreditation where you have to have, now my computer screen's frozen. I think the procedures, so to speak.
Manual and
Yeah, so we just finished doing a pretty thorough update of our police manual and procedures, which was a multi-year project. I'm hoping that that's going to be a good foundation and we won't have to go back and start from scratch.
Well, I think the thing is in the CLIA accreditation, we produce policies and procedures that were consistent with what we needed to do as an independent agency. The CLIA standard far exceeds what most departments have, especially in this area, for their policies and procedures. So while we may have the same number of policies and procedures now, while they still may brush on some of the same areas, they're by no means going to be as in-depth inside of each area of policy as CLIA will require. And that's why, I can't stress enough that legal assistance and legal review is imperative and crucial to making sure that our policies, when I bring up what CLIA has put or puts as their criteria, there are so many pieces that we don't even think of to say, oh, we need a policy on this, we need a policy on that. You look at the facility, the policies that just dictate how your facility is, how your security in your facility is, your monitoring, everything that, yes, we may have slight policies on, CLIA just goes so much more in depth into those. So while I think, yes, we have a good foundation with the policies we have, unfortunately, they do not meet that criteria that CLIA is going to require.
All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate all your hard work so far. This is going to be a big job for everybody, but we'll do it.
Thank you, Roseanne.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
Mark,
Mr. Daigle.
Chief, the CLIA accreditation, does it involve physical attributes of the public safety building?
It does. And in the conversation that I've had multiple times with Brian Cleveland and Bill Silver, I have stressed to them the need that everything that they're doing in the cell block area, especially because that's where the largest focus of CLIA is, are meeting the criteria of CLIA. They have done buildings that have been CLIA accredited, so they are familiar with what standards would have to be, and they're confident that the design that we currently have on the table does meet that criteria.
Okay, is that something we would, the legal firm you mentioned with the rest of your policies, is that something we need them to independently validate? Are you confident that the designer has met?
I'm never confident with just that quick assessment. I would like something much more profound and in depth. And the difficulty is going to CALEA, which is a national national organization, and saying, does this building fit? We're not going to get them to review it. So we do need to find, I think, that third party assessment to say yes. And that's why I would like to get that done sooner, just because I think that's a crucial piece. The last thing we want to do is have this building constructed and have them say, well, this needs to be different inside of that, and cause, again, a cost for the town to be able to do that. One of the warnings that I've heard from many towns is, and from chiefs that have been around for a while, they never sought CALEA accreditation simply because their building would not meet that standard. Now, again, they weren't undergoing renovations. They weren't in the situation we're in. They had much older facilities, but that's definitely in the back of my head, that we need to have something other than simply the architect saying, yes, it does.
It's good to know they have designed buildings that have met CALEA, and we'll just need to validate that that applies to our design as well. So thank you.
Chief, 2 questions. You mentioned the accreditation manager you're going to need. Is that something you think we could do in-house, or is that a consultant?
No, that is in-house. That's a supervisor in-house. And again, my vision of this is to, if we're able to secure the services of a law firm, have that accreditation manager work with that law firm in doing that. Because I think, again, while, we do have expertise in-house, you need that legal review. You need that expertise of someone that not only has done this many times over, is currently going to be doing it for multiple departments in our area at the same time. So I think, there's, again, I'll say it, I'm an advocate of never reinventing the wheel. And if that means we're sharing policies with regional departments to get to this place we have to be, then we'll do that.
Okay. Last question. You mentioned mutual aid. How do you envision mutual aid will work? I know we use mutual aid, right, at events like East Lyme, Celebrate East Lyme. If we take mutual aid from a town, are we going to have to ensure that they're meeting all of our standards? And if an incident does happen with a mutual aid officer, whose liability do you envision that would go against with some of the changes to liability?
Well, the liability change for that portion won't alter at all, because currently there's state statute, as well as a mutual aid agreement in the Law Enforcement Council, which is Southeastern Connecticut, that talks about mutual aid of officers to other communities. The employing agency has 100% liability for what their officers do in the field. So it is not our responsibility. Let's say at Celebrate East Lyme, we have, sometimes 13, 14 out of town officers. It's their department's responsibility how they act, what they do. Now, as Attorney Cunningham could certainly attribute, someone filing a lawsuit, they're gonna file a lawsuit against everybody, but your liability is shielded by, again, state law and those agreements that we are not responsible for what that officer does in the performance of their duties. That is borne by their employer.
Okay, and the same thing with the camera footage. Would they have to upload their footage onto the East Lyme servers?
No, they wouldn't have access under our server. So basically any video that they would have would be downloaded into their department, and then we would have to request that or get that from their department. There's no, just for security purposes, you can't, so, there are automatic downloads to take place from these cameras. That's how those systems are set up. So we wouldn't be able to just plug their camera into our system and download it. We'd have to get that data from their system.
Okay, thank you.
Questions? Anything else?
Yeah. Oh, cool. Okay. Do you think that there's any police department in the state that is close to or has already met these CALEA standards?
Oh, certainly. I believe the number going into this was about 16 departments that were already CALEA certified or accredited prior to this legislation. So yes, there are models and examples, out there. Again, that's some of the policies that I've taken a look at, and makes you understand just how voluminous they are. They are specific policies though to your agency. So while you could lean on some of them for parts, you can't just say I'm going to enact, let's say, the Guilford Police Department, for example. I'm not going to I can't take their policies and just change Guilford to East Lyme, because there's so many specific things in our community, our department, we deploy officers or facility. That's why you do need your own accreditation manager to work through your policies and then have that legal review to say, yes, they're meeting the standard that CLIA is going to look for, and work with CLIA to make sure that. Because and also CLIA comes out on multiple occasions to do site visits, to work with you, to review what you've done so far and how things are going.
I was thinking particularly as a follow-up to Paul's question as to whether there might be some buildings specifically that have met their the CLIA standards that it might be worthwhile for, in terms of teacher language, a field trip.
Yes, no, and I could not agree more with that, because I think that's certainly a very important piece of it. Yes.
Okay, thanks.
And keep in mind, before I let you go, Mr. Cunningham, we have a police commission now, thankfully, that can focus on this work and work with the chief and lieutenant and the department to make sure that we are going down the right path and getting all the boxes checked. Dedicated men and women on the police commission, their job has never been more important. Mr. Cunningham, you had something before we?
Well, yeah, I just had a question. It sounds like the storage medium is going to be, and one of the issues with the body cams and the car cams. My question is the storage proprietary to each camera system, or can that be interchanged? If you go to different cameras midstream, can you still use the same storage?
It depends what you're using. If you're using a hard storage system locally, then certainly you would have the ability for your IT people to change that over to another type of camera for their download. However, we're really reviewing, and most departments now are looking at cloud-based storages because and that is proprietary. However, with some of the vendors out there, and this is why I say it's not necessarily apples to apples, because we have options out there with some of the vendors which provide us with cloud storage, which also manages all of your video evidence, not just your body camera footage, and works with your case management system to say, say it was a robbery that took place at the mobile station. Well, that video then can be put up into that same system that your body camera footage of that response to that is. So it puts that package together. It provides links to the state's attorney's office, so they then can go into the cloud, get that information. You as a defense attorney can get that same link and get all that data. So it reduces your need sometimes for all of that duplication of a records person having to make copies of all these different videos. So there's options out there, which I foresee making our job so much easier, much more efficient. However, it's cloud-based, not server-based. And I think, really from what we're seeing, and Lieutenant Mesa can certainly weigh in with his thoughts, but I think the cloud-based solutions are what we are seeing as the way to go. And many of the other departments we're working with are seeing that same thing.
And it's all integrated here.
And the other thing too, is it also reduces your replacement cost, because we all know, and while you have to pay a yearly fee, and certainly, that's there, you lose a server, you have a problem with your downloads, and the IT people have to come out or replace parts of our server. Our in-car camera system server has been replaced, fixed, added memory and storage, all in the time that I've been here, and that's certainly a cost each time.
Thank you. Thank you for that, explaining that. That's all I have.
Questions? I thank you both for coming aboard tonight and just starting the conversation with us. We'll want to know a whole lot more. We'll have, I'm sure, updates, especially when we get to the budget season. And we'll be watching if the legislature gets back into session this year, if they're able to get back and get some work done. We'll be interested to see how some of this develops. The town is very fortunate to have you both watching over our police force. It's never been better in the history of our town, and we have great leadership as a result. As a result of the good leadership, we have a great police force. So thank you both.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good night. We'll move on. Thank you all for that. Both those great presentations. Next on our agenda are communications. I don't believe there are any in your packets. Ex officio reports are typically what happens next. Would anyone like to jump right in?
Mark, I'll go first. I have a real quick one for Parks and Rec. They finished up the year about 30,000 off in revenue. And if you look at what they did not get for the seasonal pass for out of town residents, that's about 40,000. So you can identify where that shortfall was. They did have a bit of a surplus left over from last year with the money for Cheney Park and what they had brought in last year. So they're going to be able to cover that. And then on a very positive note, and I know it was published today, on the 12th of December, there'll be a sort of a reverse light parade in the reverse light parade in McCook's, where they're gonna actually go up, park the floats will be on display, and people drive up and around onto the grass part at the top of McCook's and drive around and take a look at all the floats up there. So, you know, it won't be the same thing, but now at least will be the people in the cars will be warmed and the people in the floats will be the cold ones. So it'll be a little bit different, but there will be an event this year. And there will be a holiday stroll right after Thanksgiving. They're still working out the details for that. And obviously not being able to sit on Santa's lap, he'll be going by in a car, but they hope that they will have some type of activity. That's it.
Yeah, we'll have a low-key event. It won't be as lively, unfortunately, but we are trying to press on and bring people downtown to shop, and that's important too. That's the whole purpose of the stroll. Thanks for the updates, Kevin, and we're still looking forward to some great floats. They'll be parked up at McCook's, and we will drive through the park. And I'm very, very interested to see how this works out. This will be great. Great. Mr. Daigle, do you have anything?
A couple things. First is short and sweet. The Harbor Management and Shellfish Commission attempted to have their first meeting last evening for the first time in 6 or 7 months, but due to some technical difficulties, they were unable to get the Zoom process going. So they're looking to try and reschedule their meeting for next week. That hasn't been set yet, but they're attempting to do so. Second is Inland Wetlands Agency. They had a very lengthy meeting this past Monday night. The inland wetlands regulation change that they've had public meetings on, they have asked the agency's agent, Mr. Goschel, to prepare a resolution to change the 100-foot upland review area to 300 feet, which is less than the 500 feet they had originally brought forward, and to specifically list pieces of the records that was submitted during their public hearings as the basis for that 300-foot increase to 300 feet. So at their next meeting, they expect to take up discussion on that resolution. Additionally, they received a application to build a church off of North Brybrook Road. They also, I think they may, I'm trying to remember correctly, but I think they're going to have a public hearing on that as well, just to allow the folks in the adjacent property, because the access to that church facility does go through an existing neighborhood of 6 homes. So it's not a large neighborhood, but nonetheless, it will be. And we'll have 72 parking spaces in that facility once if it's approved and if it's built. And I think that was about it, but it was a 3-hour and 20-minute meeting the other night. Quite a bit of discussion of how they were going to proceed with their proposed regulation change.
Thank you. I know the Harvest Christian Fellowship is a group. They've owned that land for, I believe, 10 years or more. They've been fundraising, and although it feels a little odd that it's a rear lot in a residential neighborhood, that's how churches were developed way back when. Our neighborhoods are developed around churches, but this has been on the drawing board for quite some time, as a matter of fact. Thank you, Paul. It'll be interesting to see how the 300-foot buffer thing turns out within the wetlands, obviously there'll be some challenges to that as well. Mrs. Hardy.
I'm all set.
Thank you, Mr. Cunningham, up in the
Well,
corner.
the East Lyme Waterford Shellfish Commission. And as you probably read in the paper, there will not be a scallop season this year. Apparently, there just weren't enough scallops that they had sampled out there to make it worthwhile for people that might buy permits. They spent quite a while discussing their comments to the East Lyme Planning Conservation and Development Plan, and they put quite a bit of effort into coming up with comments that would be helpful, and that's about it.
Welsco is what we thought, myself and First Selectman Brule from Waterford, we thought we worked out a deal with them at the beginning of the budget season that they would pay for the pump out boat, which has become a very important part of life on the Niantic River. They carry a substantial account balance, over 6 figures. They're the only commission that's allowed to do that by state statute. So they carry a substantial, so they sell the permits and all that. They keep the money. It's not town funds. And they keep that money. And over the years, we have brought them in under our insurance umbrella and cost of board of directors, liability, E&O, and all that. So their expenses have gone way down. The revenues have gone up, frankly. And we thought we had worked out a deal that they would pay for the pump boat. They did not vote for that in their commission, and there's a little bit of confusion there. So I will be coming to the Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance for, I think we need $3,500. They have $1,500 that we will freeze on their budget and bring over. So I might need $2,000 out of contingency. You'll see that in a later meeting. The pump out boat is very, very important for the health of the Niantic River. And we definitely want to support the Save the River, Save the Hills people. And we apologize, they've been caught in the middle. More on that when it's brought in front of you, but be prepared for that. Dan, I know you heard a little bit of that probably over the last couple of meetings.
Yeah, and I didn't bring it up because I wasn't fully versed in what the background to it was, and I wanted to educate myself a little bit more before I raise the issue. But
I appreciate it.
But that is something I think that does need to be addressed in fairness to everybody. And of course, there are issues why they have that substantial budget, and so I'll let them address that with you. And
Yeah, we'll work it out.
yeah, I hope it can be worked out.
They buy their own boat, they buy their own motor. I think
Right.
they're for their own fuel, but there's still an imbalance. We haven't seen a capital plan from them, and we've just been asking for that for a little bit. We'll work that out, but thank you for your diplomacy and your patience with that, and we're gonna make it all work because again,
Okay.
well, Mr. Salerno, lastly.
Building met, and they went over, Mark was there and Paul was there, they went over the public safety building plans with the architect. So that's moving forward. There'll be probably a next meeting appointing the clerk of the works. And the Board of Ed budget for the schools are finishing up. It looks like they're probably gonna be $200,000 on the budget, which is good news. That's all I have for now.
No chance of me getting my grimy little paws on that 200,000, is there? Didn't think so. No, that's great news, and what a huge project that is now whittling down to the remaining little checklist items. And my sincere appreciation for the building commission. I know I speak for all of you. Sandy, I conversed with you today, Paul, about Paul and the harbor management had that issue last night with technical difficulties. Were you able to get Carmen or someone else to set up their Zoom meetings? Because when I do it, I have to be the host. So I don't know how to do it any other way.
Sure, I'll work with Carmen.
Carmen or even Jen Lindo downstairs can set up those meetings. She's been doing it for all the land use committees, and we can set that up. There's two commissions that are looking for. I think actually Rocky too is looking for
Mhm.
whole building. Okay.
Yep.
All right. What are you watching?
I don't, something spooky. It's October.
Every time you unmute, right. Thank you. Thank you for that. Folks, the only thing I have is, of course, you heard about Code Red. You may have heard about it before I did. You may have heard about it before Steve Mansfield, the health director locally, did. It was something the governor just did, told the news agencies, had some press conference in the middle of the afternoon, made some towns red and some orange, made some yellow, and I was getting calls from reporters in Hartford, and I didn't even know what they were talking about. So over 24, 48 hours later, as the information actually got disseminated to the towns, we understood what that meant. One of the provisions of being a code red town is that we can roll back to a phase 2, and it gives first selectmen, I would of course meet with you before I did this, to roll back to phase 2 on advice from our health district and other area towns that are dealing with orange and red. We chose that we don't think that's the right move. It does limit restaurant capacity, it limits churches again, and it limits libraries, but it doesn't really attack the crux of the problem. And the crux of the problem really, folks, is small groups. It's 3 or 4 teenagers in a car socializing somewhere, or families actually getting together saying, well, it's a small group and I know these people. I've been there, I've seen it. And it's, 6 adults, and it's the neighborhood thing, it's the friend thing, it's the parents of the kids' friends thing, or it's just on the sidelines at a sporting event. There have been some youth sport breakouts as well. So we're asking that gets, if not shut down, that we have a better handle on what's going on. Another issue with this is because we're a small town, numbers get inflated quickly. A family of 4 or 5 all getting COVID, 5 incidences would automatically put us well above the numbers, one family, because it's the number per 100,000, but we have less than 20,000. So you're dividing everything by 5. So it's very easy for a small town like us to hit numbers very quickly to move us into the governor's definition of a red town. We are watching it, and frankly, if things get worse and things trend in the wrong direction, then we are considering action, including a rollback to phase 2, but also limiting exposure on the boardwalk, shutting down parks, and other items. And again, we need to send the message. It's a message we've been sending since March. Wear a mask, stay away from people, especially the 6-foot conversations within 15 minutes. That's contact with someone potentially, and that's where the disease spreads. So we're seeing that. We're seeing it with students. We're seeing it with moms and dads going back to work, and it is what it is. So we're continuing that messaging, and I'm paying obviously very close attention to it. I'm in several meetings a week on the subject. Yes, Mr. Daigle.
The designation of yellow, orange, and red, is that based on the positivity rate?
Yeah, it's based on the number of cases in town per 100,000.
Okay.
So I think if it's 14 cases per 100,000 in a given 2-week period, because it's a rolling 2 weeks too. So 2 weeks ago we had a high spike. Last week it went down. Yet last week is the week we got put on code red. So there's a lot of confusion out on the street. The bottom line is more numbers will come out tomorrow. I don't know what to expect.
Do we know what what it has to be reduced to lose the red alert?
Red alert. Sounds like a movie.
Only
Yeah,
good- Mark, I only because I asked my son about this and he said we have to drop under that number for average for 2 weeks for that per
what's
100,000.
the number?
I think if we have,
9?
no, I thought it was even less than that. If we have 9 people in a 2-week period, we're right at the, yeah, right, we're at code red, so.
So it has to be less than 9 people over a 2-week period to get our color designation changed.
Right. And you know, I do understand what they're doing, and the numbers are going up everywhere. Europe is blowing up. Southeastern Connecticut, right up 395 is blowing up. You'll see more towns added tomorrow, I've been told. And it is the nature of this thing. We are into a rebirth of it, a phase 2. Here it comes, and we just need to do our parts. And while we can talk about being fatigued and all that, the bottom line is we can't let our guard down, and need to stay vigilant. So that's what it is. We are in a code red, as defined by the governor's people, and now we kind of know what that means. We are watching. This is serious, and again, if the trends continue, it's not so much the code red, but if the numbers continue to spike up, we need to take more action, and the schools are watching that as well. That's really all I have, unless you have any specific questions for me.
Mark, I have a couple.
Yes.
Did we stop sending packets out? I noticed I haven't gotten one. Maybe it was discussed. I just don't remember the discussion.
Sandy?
So we stopped sending packets out back in March when we kind of closed town hall. And it's kind of hoping we could continue that. I will, if somebody would like it printed, I'll print it. If you want me to go back to sending them out to everyone, I'll go back to doing that, whatever you'd like.
I mean, I prefer to print. I mean, I didn't really get anything till a little late today, so it'd be nice to, I don't know.
You didn't get the email on Monday?
I didn't get the agenda till I think today, right before the meeting, but I could be wrong.
That was strange because
About Monday.
Monday.
They really should go on Friday. So we will make sure that you get it before the weekend from now on. It needs to go out, so you have a bulk of the information. When we have bulky stuff, we will start putting it in the mail, if it's just too much for you to print and all that. But we are trying to reduce a little bit and move to at least the minutes and the agenda and a few of the other odds and ends. The motions, we can put that in form, and you should be able to handle that. But you should get it on Friday from now on, so you have the weekend, as traditionally when I usually review it. And then we can do follow-ups Monday and Tuesday for the things that trickle in. Thanks, Mark. Anything else? Mr. Salerno, are you muted? It doesn't say you're muted, but your microphone is not. Is everyone else?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, there we go.
Okay. I know we're not the authority anymore on signage in town, but I noticed on Society Road the other day that there's a new stop sign put between Dean Road and Society. I was not aware of that. Can we get a report when sign changes happen from the police commission so that the Board of Selectmen is aware of that? Please.
Sure.
Okay. And lastly, I hate to ask this, Mark, we talked about it a little bit. Can you give us some guidance of what we're supposed to tell people on Halloween? Are we just going to refer to Ledgelight's guidance this year? I get this question a lot, and I just don't know the answer.
I know, and you know I'm tiptoeing into it, right? The last thing I want to do is cancel Halloween again. So you may have picked up on my Facebook page. What I did is I copied, if you go to connecticut.gov/coronavirus, all the information there is about the coronavirus. If you backslash one more time and type in Halloween, the guidance for Halloween is on there. The do's, the don'ts, the maybes, if you have to, and you know, if you have to, here's what you could do, kind of thing. So we're not canceling Halloween. We are suggesting a modified approach that it'd be better if people put bowls of candy out at their front step and allow kids go, you know, maybe in a shortened path with their parents, not in groups of kids. That will be specifically on that site, that, you know, if the parents were to take one other group with them, but to limit the number of kids, go to door. There might be bowls or grab bags, you know, goodie bags, prepared bags out on the front step. And we're asking that to be the preferred way of doing it. If people choose to answer the door, we're asking for masks. We're suggesting that kids don't go in there to a bowl of candy, but candy is handed and put in the bag for the kids, and that is all on there on the CDC, on the Connecticut.gov website. They're not looking for any mass gatherings, so no trick or trunk. You can't have those kind of things. We're looking for no neighborhood parties, no big kid gathering, no hay rides, no corn mazes. All those other things are on there as well. It's a bummer. This is the year we're living in. This is, you know, especially, forget the code red thing, especially with the numbers going in the wrong direction, especially with the schools struggling to keep the schools open, with so many cases hitting the schools. This is very important, and the timing is very important to go back to reviewing Halloween. So go on to that site. If you have questions, by all means, call me. We can. I've tried to put that out there, and that's the direction we would like to point people at.
Okay.
And that is to check out the Connecticut.gov/coronavirus website, or I have the Facebook page. I copied it. I would think the public safety page, which is typically the town's official Facebook page, they will copy it too. And my guess is Mike Mines will put something up there, but maybe I'll write something very specific to East Lyme. We're coming up on, you know, it's 10 days to Halloween. So by this weekend, let me see if I can get something up on the website. Again, we're wishing not to cancel it, but if the parents can reduce the size of this, that would be helpful.
Mark, if I may?
Yes, Dan.
Yeah, I think it's really important that we get that message out there. You know, if you don't want to cancel it, I can understand that. However, this is getting more serious day by day. I think if we're going to use those policies, maybe we can boil it down to several bullets that can be put out and easily distributed on Facebook and other media, so people will know what the guidelines are. I think that would be very helpful and worthwhile to do it.
Listen, it's out there. It's out there tonight. So after this lengthy meeting, today or tomorrow, if you just browse it, if you would, kind of look through it, and if you want to send me emails of suggestions, I'm open to them. I don't have all the answers. Clearly, based on last year, I don't have all the answers. Here's the bottom line. I'd love for, you know, I live on a short street of 10 people, 10 houses. And if I had little toddlers, I might take them around my quick little neighborhood, and I would not want any human interaction. And if so, it'd be masked up, and the kids have to be masked up too.
Right.
A rubber Batman thing or Casper the Friendly Ghost does not cut it. It has to be a surgical mask. It has to be legit. And you know, that cuts into it. But, you know, seeing 6 houses or 10 houses on the street and having the kids at least a chance to dress up and have some soup before they go out and all that. I'm all into that. It's very much the American thing. But we need to put the message out, Dan, and I think you're right. So if you want to take a look at that and maybe take a look at some of the bullets that are on that, I'd appreciate you boiling down some of the finer points for me, and everyone else too.
I'd be happy to.
Thank you very much.
Can we just a guidance or just a link put on the town website too?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
If it isn't on there already, typically Mike.
I don't see it right now, but
yeah. Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
What else, Marky, anything? Anyone
That's all
else?
I got.
Okay, so I don't think I have much in the way of public here for public comment, but I'll ask as if anyone would like to speak. There's a few, of course, dispatches here. They're just monitoring. Executive session will move in for the purposes of discussing personnel and real estate matters. Hopefully, this will be a short time, and then we'll come back to adjourn. So I'll bid adieu to you, Sandy, and to
Want me to make a motion first?
yeah.
Okay, it's Kevin Siri. I'll move to enter into executive session at 9:22 PM for the purpose of discussing personnel and real estate matters.
Second, Mark Sparrow.
Motion and second. All in favor of going to executive session? Say aye.
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 Very good. See you all that don't belong. I'm going to stop the recording.